So the last 2 weeks have been about Ohio State tinkering and experimenting with a lot of different things. And secondary, it's creating a rotation with Jermaine Matthews on the outside with Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun as the starters. But at the same time, through 10 games, it's been some up and down moments for these cornerbacks, dating back to the Oregon game, where obviously the Oregon game was able to exploit some things. And we've seen some other things since then. We've seen some good, we've seen some bad, we've seen some ugly, and we've seen some pretty. But now Ohio State's heading to a point of the schedule where 2 of its next 3 potential games are against teams who might be able to exploit Ohio State's roller coaster of a season with its cornerbacks. Scale of 1 to 10, Andrew, what's your concern level that Ohio State's cornerbacks could cost it another game?
Probably right now, probably like a 6.5, 7. I think going into the year, we kind of looked at this defense as impenetrable. We looked at this unit as, well, you got great edge rushers, and you got a great interior, and you got great safeties, and you got great corners. And we don't know where this defense can really be attacked. And maybe it's the linebackers. And I think the linebackers have played very, very well, Cody Simon and Sonny Styles specifically. Now you have questions about corner, because I think the Oregon game, I don't know what the order of operations was, whether Oregon looked at Ohio State's corners and went, we can attack them, we're going to, or if they just said, we have the receivers to attack them, and then they did, and they did it well, and everybody else said, we can go after these guys. But I think there's a pretty clear notion now that since the Oregon game, Penn State maybe notwithstanding, because they just didn't have very good receivers on the outside, there have been teams that have looked at Ohio State's corners and have really not been afraid of them. So I'm fairly concerned about this. Indiana's got a really strong passing attack. We'll see how that plays out. But this team's goals are not beat Indiana. This team's goals are, can we get through Indiana? And what does that tell us about the next portion of the season? Because you got Michigan right after that, who they can't throw the ball. Then you might have Oregon. So I'm fairly concerned about this cornerback room, because even today there were some questions with Davison Igbinosun out on the penalty. You worry if that's going to bite you in the butt later on. Jermaine Matthews, I didn't think there was, bad performance, but I wouldn't consider it sharp. Like, there's just questions that you have about kind of each member of the secondary right now, and I think they need a big game to kind of answer those questions, and they're not going away anytime soon. I'm fairly concerned about it.
You said 6.5?
6.5 or 7, yeah.
Stefan, 1 to 10, what's your concern level?
Yeah, probably like around an 8, maybe just a little bit above Andrew. I think the last time we've seen this unit truly tested was still the Oregon game. I don't think any other team has had the receivers even close to that. And Indiana probably doesn't have the receivers of Oregon, but they've got some pretty good receivers, right? Like Nebraska, Penn State, as you mentioned, Purdue, Northwestern, like they don't have elite receivers to make me go, okay, everything's fine. Because even against Penn State, we saw Davison get a holding penalty. Even against Nebraska and here against Northwestern, we've seen Denzel Burke give up some completions. You mentioned a stat earlier. Coming into this game, Denzel...
28 targets, 23 catches.
Yeah, so when teams are going at these guys, they're having some success. And that makes me think that we'll see against Indiana. Like, my scale's at an 8, and against Indiana, it could probably drop a little bit just because I do think Indiana's passing offense is explosive and dangerous. And if Ohio State does a good job against them, it'll probably mean something a little bit more than the previous games. But it's still a concern because we just haven't seen consistent play from them, right? Like, we've said at times, like, all right, Denzel looks like he's doing better. But then there's another play that you're, like, scratching your head a little bit. So it's just a lack of consistency right now that leaves me thinking – I don't know how much has changed since the Oregon game because I just haven't really seen it at a consistent level against a team even close to that caliber.
That's stats per PFF, which we always say take with a grain of salt. I don't know why teams aren't scared of these two. Coming into the season, you were making a conversation of, is this the best cornerback tandem in college football? I don't even think I'd put them in the top 10. If I actually sat down and was watching game by game by game of everybody around the country, I'm not sure. And maybe I would. I don't know. That's hyperbolic. I'm at a 10. And I'm not hyperbolic just to make my point. If you're playing bingo, here's what's on your Ohio State bingo card. Davison Igbinosun is going to be handsy. Denzel Burke is going to have a one-on-one opportunity that he should win and he doesn't win it. And teams have been banking on that. Teams have been banking on if you just throw it at Davison enough, you'll eventually get a free 15 yards. If you just throw it at Denzel enough, you'll eventually get a free 15 yards, so it's going to be a completion in the situation. It's at a 10. I don't think Indiana has elite receivers. I think they have 4 or 5 decent guys and a pretty accurate quarterback in Curtis Rourke, and they specialize in the back shoulder. And that's where these two get in trouble. They get in trouble on the back shoulder throws when Davison Igbinosun gets locked up in coverage, it's a flag. Denzel Burke gets locked up in coverage, isn't looking for the ball, and all of a sudden it's a catch on the sideline. It's not a situation of – the Oregon game is still an outlier in terms of Denzel Burke getting beat down the field. We haven't seen that. What we've seen is one-on-one, Ohio State sends a blitz, it gets pressure, the opponent just sends a back shoulder fade, and it's a completion or it's a penalty. And that's what Indiana specializes in. So it's one of those situations where Ohio State has a flaw, and they're about to play a team who specializes in exploiting that level of a flaw.
Well, I was going to say, so I think that this Indiana game is going to be not completely indicative of maybe how this secondary is progressing and where they're at, but I think it's a nice test because Ohio State notwithstanding, of the opponents that they could play in the Big Ten, Indiana probably has the second best passing attack behind Oregon. That'd be fair to say? So if you don't play well against Indiana, what would give you the confidence that they're going to play well against Oregon at that point? I think that this is maybe a good benchmark because when you're talking about the level of passing attack, like you were saying, Indiana's probably second best on your schedule in of the 13 games that you're going to play, assuming you make a Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, but even that's how what I am simply is you're bad at the thing the other team is good at.
Sure.
This
right,
very
exactly.
specific. It's not about the whole passing attack. It's about this one certain thing Indiana does that seems to keep being a problem for these two corners. I am actually not that worried that Oregon is going to do to these corners what it did the last time. Because, again, this is not about is Denzel Burke going to get beat down the field. This is about this one little thing that Indiana does really, really well, and Ohio State just seems to not be able to do better at. And I wonder if that's how Indiana works its way up the field. That's why I'm at a 10. I'm at like a 7 with the rest of the schedule. It's just with this team, because of what they do well and what Ohio State does not so well, that I'm a little bit more concerned about it. And I don't know, because it's not going to – if they shut down Indiana, it's not going to solve anything for me against Oregon or anything else, because it's not the same. It's apples to oranges when you're talking about passing games. So even I don't know if they're the first or the second best passing attack. I just know they do this thing well. And Ohio State has not proven to be able to stop it in a way that's efficient quite yet. Jermaine Matthews did almost give up a touchdown today, and a more accurate quarterback it is. But also he's getting reps, man. He's learning in real time. He's their best coverage guy. He's got to get these reps to learn.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the reason we're having this conversation on the corners, yeah, some of it is the completions they gave up early in the game. Some of it is that in the fourth quarter – when the game was done and every defensive starter was out, except for one was still on the field. It was Denzel Burke. It's clear that they're still trying to work some things and get some more reps there to figure out what's going on.
So it's they got this one issue, and they got to get it solved, and they just so happen to play a team where it's better get solved quickly, or it might be the reason Indiana might put a couple of drives together, regardless of how you think that game impacts things. We'll continue to have this conversation on Buckeye Talk throughout the entire week as Indiana week has arrived. Get the text 614-350-3315. Andrew, Stefan, Steven, see you later.